but it was cut off for many, many years from the waterfront. And it was only quite late in the game that the city decided to try to reinvigorate the waterfront. There was a great deal of urban depopulation and economic disinvestment that happened. That being said, I mean, we're still talking about Washington, D.C., which is like one of the great markets of the world, with great metro access and great population. So in many ways, it was actually set up for success. So one might think, well, I mean, look, we can actually, what's the big deal in doing real estate development in Washington, D.C.? Well, in fact, when you have waterfront redevelopment with infrastructure challenges, environmental challenges, you're always going to have ways that the public sector is going to have to respond and to give ways for the private sector to compensate. So just to give a brief history, this is sort of what things looked like before the waterfront development. It was basically low-lying residential and retail operations that existed on the waterfront. And the city said, hey, we want to try to do something fantastic, but we're going to have to commit to a very, very long timeline. This was more than 20 years in the making that the city actually committed to. If you kind of want to see a before and after picture, this is what we're talking about. This was very, very close to the downtown. Again, cut off from the center, but something that had a lot going for it, essentially. There was flooding that happened in the downtown area. There was a lack of efficient land use. There was very, very low-level retail, restaurants, and things like that that were existing. Lots of sewage overflows and pollution. And there was a great need to try to say, let's come in and stabilize the waterfront, build underground parking and prevent flooding and so forth, so that we could actually build a high-level development on the site. This was something that was very, very challenging. So construction began, as you can see here. And ultimately what you see now, it looks very simple, but it actually took more than 15 years, essentially, to go from sort of conception to the development stage. I know that the conference there is very, very concerned with finance as a challenge. You know, often we ask, you know, sort of what are the magic formulas that allow for development to sort of happen without any cost. Well, even in this very sophisticated environment, even in this market that was potentially the best in the world at the time of the housing downturn that happened in 2009, 2010, which led to the collapse of the world economy, we were still talking about Washington, D.C. There was already existing infrastructure. There was our existing metro access, roads, sewer, water. Yet there was still a need for public subsidy. So when the city came together to talk about how we might, generate this land redevelopment, there was still a need to contribute land, at a zero cost. And this very much, and there was very much a need for private equity to lead. Now we have something in the United States which doesn't really exist anywhere else, but a lot of markets have looked at it, which is basically sort of ring-fencing tax revenues to help support public bonds. This was required in this particular downtown development, where 10% of the total equity was basically sort of carving off public tax revenues to sort of support the public bonds to make this a reality. So very much a difficult challenge for DC. So I think one of the main takeaways from DC waterfront was basically that the city realized this was going to take 10, 15, 20 years, we don't know, many, many market cycles. There was going to be a need for the city to sort of help prepare the development landscape to help a private developer sort of weather all these storms and go through these market cycles. We're convening public bonds, but we want the private sector to still, sort of take the lead on that. So there was a lot of push and pull in terms of what we wanted the private sector to lead on with some sort of backing from the public sector. And this was a big challenge. So despite this fantastic environment, there was still land at no cost provided to the developer and still public revenues provided, as well as the long lead time on development financing. So I think one of the main takeaways from DC's experience is to say that even in the best of circumstances, even in the best of markets, there's still a need for the public sector to be flexible, to provide sort of patient capital, that ability to help the market weather the storms of what goes on, to help clear the way when it comes to permitting and infrastructure guidelines, to provide those sort of incentives and help the developer sort of carry the private sector cost. I want to turn our attention very quickly to India, to another example. This is one you may be familiar with, Ahmedabad, India. This has been a very celebrated project over the last 10 years. Essentially what you had was a riverfront that was flooded, that was prone to destabilization of the land, lack of ability to provide financing. And so the city sort of came in and said, can we stabilize this riverfront and create a new public space? Now, there were a lot of challenges publicly. As we said, there was flooding, there was sewage overflows. The main impulse here, as opposed to the DC example, which was sort of a commercially driven project, this one was a privately driven project. Can we sort of say, you know, provide public space that will help restore the environment, help restore sort of the public needs that are there, that public health degradation and so forth, and create a space for the city to have access to the river. So unlike DC, which was sort of saying, can we have sort of a rejuvenated economic program for this area, this one was one where it was really saying, can we have a public space that is going to be reinvigorated? And how does the public sector provide financing for public space, while at the same time trying to get some payback for this? It was a real challenge. This is sort of a before picture, if you will. The need for Ahmedabad was to provide about $250 million of investment to rehabilitate the area. And this is kind of after the fact. They reclaimed lots of land along the river. And the idea was that even though the project was conceived as a public space, public works project, there was still the ability to say, hey, look, if we sort of complete this riverfront rehabilitation, we can still have enough land to sell off a little bit and pay back what we invested. And that is in fact what they did. It was a very contentious project because there was a lot of public history that went along with this land. This was sort of Gandhi's ashram where he was founded. So they didn't want to just turn it into a commercial development. What they did was they said, okay, well, we're going to do a lot of public space rehabilitation, but we're going to take a small amount, in this case 15 to 20%, and sort of set it apart as a private land sale. Now, even doing that, they were able to essentially recuperate their investment. Now, this helped them pay for the redevelopment along the land front. That was great. It didn't necessarily create sort of long-term, economic development that helped to, generate long-term returns. However, they were still able to say that if we sort of put this investment forward from the public sector, invest a land authority with all the development rights and ownership of that land, to be able to raise debt, to be able to raise capital, and then sell off those development rights, that would allow them to essentially recuperate their investment. So there was still sort of a happy outcome for this. You can kind of see here sort of the way it was structured. The city said we're going to sort of invest this authority, a special purpose vehicle with sort of land rights, which could then go out for authority, and then to allow them to make the investments they need and generate the public revenues they need to pay off. This is kind of an after picture that you see. And then finally, just to move on, this is in River Basin, which basically runs through the city and is prone to flooding. The city has a number of challenges with regards to this river basin. The first being that, of course, the human cost of dealing with flooding with all the people that live along the river basin. So the city wants to come in and say, look, let's fix the flooding problem here. We want to finance this, but instead of approaching this as a public works project, which essentially doesn't have a payback, they're essentially looking at it as a land reclamation project. If we invest in the flood zones to try to to sort of stop the flooding, we're going to create viable land that can be used for development. Now, Msimbazi and Dar es Salaam, they're looking primarily at affordable housing to lead the way, which has its own challenges. How do we provide market-based financing for development that is essentially at sub-market rate? That's its own challenge. However, the city is basically saying, look, we're creating a long-term investment in land stabilization, so developers that come in and are going to benefit from that, we're going to try to exact payments in terms of either in-kind contributions or in terms of financial payments that will support the long-term housing developments of Dar es Salaam. So I know we're short on time here. I just want to say a few things in passing as we look at these few examples and as takeaways. When we look at waterfront financing, whether it's riverfront, lakefront, river basin, whatever the case might be, it's a real challenge. And when the public sector looks to invest into these spaces, they're actually creating long-term value for the private sector. And so they should recognize that and understand that they can get value out of that from the private sector. So when they look to coordinate a development, they want to say, hey, we're going to invest particular authorities with this. So let's take all the public value that we're creating, whether that's through land stabilization, whether that's through simple infrastructure provision, whatever the case might be, they can create value and they should look to take advantage of that. That being said, it's not easy. It's not as simple as saying, okay, we're going to invest a little bit of money so the private sector should come in and pay for everything. They should expect that these are new markets. These are challenging markets. The private sector is going to need a lot of support over a long period of time. So support for them, partnership with them is going to be very, very critical. And basically, while they're leveraging their own investments, they should still look at the private partners as partners, exactly that, and say, look, we're going to help clear the ground for you. And whether it comes to entitlements or permitting or infrastructure, whatever the case might be. But, and while we expect to be sort of compensated for that partnership, we do have sympathy for you in terms of what you're trying to do. We can't expect you to weather the storm for 10, 15, 20 years of market cycles. So creating kind of understanding the value that the public sector is creating, helping to prep the ground for a public-private partnership is critical. And of course, being flexible in terms of how that partnership grows over time is going to be critical with all these cases. So with that, I'll leave it, and I'll open the floor for questions, or happy to discuss outside this forum with anyone that's interested. Thank you.
All right. Many thanks to you, Mr. William Hunt. And so we encourage all our online audience to please project their questions by placing them in the comment section. We will be able to read that out and then get back to you. Mr. Hunt, thank you very much for those interventions. You've given us various perspectives to reflect on as we narrowed down to our particular or peculiar situation, emerging and innovative financing models for flood risk reduction. For the next 45 minutes, let's receive up here the moderator, Engineer Dr. Betha Date, together with the panelist, Dr. Foster, Mr. Foster Jemfi, Mrs. Ekuya Champoma Asante, and Mr. Samson A. Note. Please, they are yours for the applause. If Madam Moderator desires to use the podium, it's available.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon to our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our panel session. This afternoon, we are focusing on emerging and innovative financing models for flood risk reduction. And this morning we were lucky to hear about a hydro fund, and we've seen governments make some contribution, a very significant contribution. But we know that flooding in our cities is costing maybe more than 2% of our GDP annually. We also know that flood management in Ghana faces significant financial challenges, characterized by gap between the funding and how much is needed. So we know government has put in millions of dollars. We've heard also about the Garage project in presentations today, which government has invested about $350 million. But recently I heard a news item that said that we need more than $6 billion to deal with our flooding challenges. And this is just capital investment. We are not even talking about the O&M and other recurring costs. So it's important that we have a discussion on financing. Where are we going to get the money from? This morning, the Honorable Minister said we've got to put our money where our mouth is. So if flooding is very, very important for us, it is important to ask ourselves, where are we going to get the financing and how are we going to get it? And we are lucky to have with us distinguished panelists. I'll introduce them very quickly. From the far left, that's my far left and your far right, we have Mr. Samson Norte, who is an economist with extensive experience in international finance and public investment as well as debt management. He is currently a lead consultant at Sanapi Advisory Consults, and he has previously had leadership roles at Ministry of Finance, and he's also worked as the managing director of Gold Coast Refinery. So that's Mr. Samson Norte at your very far right, my very far left. Thank you. Next to him, we have Mr. Foster Abuaji Jemfi. He is a principal economics officer at the Ministry of Finance, and he specializes in climate finance mobilization from different sources. He's currently Ghana's focal person for the Green Climate Fund, and he also has experiences with disaster risk financing, and he's also a focal person for the V20 group, which looks at the most vulnerable 20 countries when it comes to climate resilience and disasters. So let's welcome Mr. Foster. Thank you. Last but not the least, we've got a very powerful and a wonderful lady. She holds an MSc in Development Planning and Management from KNUST, and she's currently a project manager specializing in climate risk and finance, as well as disaster risk management. She leads what is called the INSU Resilience Solutions. So today we're going to hear about very solid resilience solutions from her. And this INSU Resilience Solutions Fund is part of an IDA Ghana project. And this project collaborates with UNDP, Alliance SE, and Swiss Reinsurance to develop sovereign parametric flood insurance solutions for Ghana. Let me repeat the last one, sovereign parametric flood insurance solutions. She's going to tell us more about that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our lady, Madam Ekuya Echampoma Asante. So, as I was just introduced, I'm your moderator, Beth Adate, and so without much ado, we'll go to our panelists. Since I want to always promote women, let me start with our very honorable lady, Madam Ekuya Echampoma Asante. So the question to you is, what could we consider as innovative financing models which we could adopt to help us ensure sustainable flood risk reduction? Thank you.
Hello. So thank you very much for the question. Before I answer that, I would want to say that, today we've said a lot about the impact of flood on the livelihoods, on critical infrastructure in the space we find ourselves. And insurance really plays a role here, especially that whenever there is an emergent situation in the country, there is a lot of pressure on government to arrange for finances, to arrange for resources, to enable them actually support with the recovery and response process that comes with the occurrence. And if we talk about insurance, it's not only a reactive tool, it's also really a proactive tool or a proactive enabler for resilience, which actually incentivizes for investment for flood resilience. I say this because, insurance is basically a price tag on a risk. And this helps government to make a very good decision. If we are talking about prevention measures, you're talking about preparedness measures, you would actually juxtapose this as against the price tag that is actually being given by an insurer, that, okay, looking at this particular space, if you are supposed to pay this X amount of money, and as a government institution, you look at the measures that you have to place, you have to put in place, you look at the X amount that goes into it. It actually helps you make a cost-benefit analysis and make a very informed decision as a government. And also, you'd realize that, as I already mentioned, that it also supports the government to actually be less burdened. So there is an insurance solution that exists that government can actually leverage on and not be so much pressured when it comes to going to look out for other resources. Here, I would want to talk about the INSU Resilience Solution IDF project. IDF is the Insurance Development Forum, which brings together the expertise of Allianz. It brings together the expertise of Swiss Re and also the expertise of the United Nations Development Program. And this particular project that is currently ongoing actually is to help government to support government climate resilience in these times, and also to enhance the capacities of government institutions, and also in regards to the National Disaster Management Organization, which are key stakeholders that actually respond to these measures. Through this intervention, we have been able to develop 2 parametric solutions. And if I talk about parametric solution, this is different from a traditional insurance solution that we have in the market, that you would have to do a loss assessment. With the parametric solutions, it's actually based on triggers, it's based on parameter. So if a parameter is actually met, a payout is given. And with this, we've developed 2 products, and one is called the excess rainfall. This excess rainfall is based on rainfall amount from the Ghana Meteorological Agency. There was an extensive assessment that was done, and comparing Ghana Meteorological Agency's data as against satellite data, you'd realize that the Ghana Meteorological data actually speaks well to what currently exists in the space. So we have this rainfall product, and we have also another one called the flood footprint product. This flood footprint product is based on flood extent. In this case, there is an existing called ISI as a micro-satellite radar technology that actually helps to take coverage of flood situations on the ground, a very actual data that helps a payout to be given. So this flood footprint product too has been developed for the government. This is a sovereign product, and I speak in the space of urban flooding and also in the space of the Greater Accra metropolitan area. This is the scope in which we are currently working as a project. So this is really an innovative tool that government could also fall on. Now there's a concept. It's up to the government to actually bring it into the market, to make it, possible for them to be able to, for an insurance company to be able to insure and to be receiving payout when an incident happens. I would just want to end by saying that we know that currently what happened in the space is more like flash floods. Almost every time or every year when there is an impact of flood, when there is an occurrence of flood, it happens every year. It becomes more like an annual ritual. But it's not so exciting, or it doesn't really make much sense for the government if, for instance, a flash flood is actually being, a product is being developed for flash floods, because in this case, the premium becomes very high, and government have to actually put a lot of investment in this. So the product that I just talked about looks at excess rainfall. Okay. It looks at, extreme rainfall, extreme flood event. Sorry for that. So extreme flood event. So for instance, the 2015 flood that actually happened in the state happened in here that affected a lot of people. These are some examples of these flood events that these products could be a resource for that. Perfect. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So government is here, and I'm sure government will respond. But maybe before we come to government, maybe we would want to hear another solution from Mr. Samson Norty. Maybe could you also tell us from your end what financial models or incentives that you have found most effective to promote flood management? Before we come to Mr. Foster, Mr. Norty, if you could help us with some innovative solutions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. Most innovative and incentives for flood reduction. Yes. Yeah, I think the throughout the talking this morning, if you could listen, what we have heard and what we see, the most effective ones or efficient ones will be the one that applies sustainable approaches. By sustainable approaches, we are not only talking of how the waters are contained, but even the use, the quality of the water that is gathered, its reuse, retention, and so many other things. It's also, from the sustainable approaches, it's also a solution probably which apply less resources but achieve more goals, and also use more of available materials and so forth. Saying this, I think since morning, for financing approaches or financing scheme, I think we've all heard that both central government and sub-national government, that is the MMDAs and so forth, are all fiscally tight. So we have to look out for other innovative financing scheme. I want to talk briefly or just mention 3 areas that I'm looking at, that we can look at, which are, first of all, into derivative financing. Also look at self-help community-based approaches, as well as green financing. Okay, for derivative approaches, I think I'll mention derivative approach first because right now Ghana is very ripe, for the solution I'm talking of. And first of all, we can attempt or look at the debts for nature swap development. This is a scheme which probably for high or debt-ridden countries, can apply or get relief, that is fiscal relief, to implement projects, that is sustainable projects, by my look, that can contain our flooding risk. I think this have been practiced in a lot of countries. We have Peru in '97. We have Poland, 203. I think Seychelles also have yeah, a similar thing, about 27 million, and they got to do some land conservation, sorry. Then I think currently Congo, Gabon is also looking at an approach like that, targeting about 160 million. They are doing tendering for it. I think currently these are some of the effective areas that we can look at. I'm also talking of community self-help approaches, just like we did the rural electrification self-help. We have the communities, and we have, let me say, their stake in whatever solution that government is coming up with. And that, I think, can also, if well developed or well looked at, it can also provide huge relief, from government resources, to build some of these flood resilience infrastructures. Then the green financing, that will look at the climate, environmental financing schemes, so many others can be developed out of that.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So he's just talked about debt swap, green financing, and self-help. So for the first two, I think governments would have to play a very key role. And so we are lucky to have Foster from the Ministry of Finance. So my question to Mr. Foster is, how can the government collaborate with international partners, looking at the examples he mentioned, to improve flood risk financing mechanisms? How could we collaborate with international partners? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and also organizers of this workshop. I think timing is right for this kind of discussion, especially when the IPPC report highlight and is very strong that moving forward we're going to experience much severe drought and flood where you find yourself. I think the discussion for the technical people, beneficiary, political leaders is very key for us to collaborate to take a very decisive decision. But when you ask me this question about international, how we can collaborate to improve partnership in the area of disaster risks, I think it's very important. This is discussed very well and we find solution, because if you look at the discussion right down from 2001 after the Paris Agreement, I think Ghana, we are not doing that bad, but we can do more, because in there we are expected to commit to the fight on climate change, and one of the area is disaster risks. And to be able to do that, financing is very key. And our collaboration along this trend has been very, very important. And we have done some, we've done well, but somehow I think if you ask me, we can do better. One of the key things we can collaborate is the area of technical capacity, and it's very key. We have demonstrated that with some partners, and I believe Equia has mentioned some of them, our collaboration with the IDF, INSU solution and all that. They build a capacity of some institution, and I'm sure now we understand what we should do. In terms of the modeling, available modeling, we are also somehow to a point. Another area we can also collaborate is financial support, and I believe this is where everybody would want to hear what we've been doing. A number of things have been done. One critical area is our collaboration with the Green Climate Fund, and I'm happy Gareth is here. We've been working with them to be able to access funding from the Green Climate Fund to be able to support the project that they are doing. Another area is working with the Global Shield, in which they have different intervention over there, and within that they are looking at climate insurance, and the Global Shield Solution Platform is supporting the country as at now, providing some support for us to be able to ensure the Greater Accra metropolitan area. And under the Global Shield, we've been able to also assess some funding also there.
Okay.
Another area also that we collaborating very extensively currently, as we are the chair for the Climate Vulnerable Forum, under the V20 multi-donor support, and also we've been able to tap into some of the funding over there. And all these are geared towards disaster risk intervention or solutions. And I believe if we work together and be able to push forward, we'll be able to access a lot of this funding. But I think it's important we also highlight the point that when it comes to issues of disaster risk, most of the time it affects the vulnerable people within the country. And so one of the key things based on our study is to be able to support the smallholder farmers. Okay. And under the African Risk Capacity, we're also working on an intervention to be able to support them, smallholder farmers within the northern region, so that they have the edge, the guarantee to be able to produce without getting worried about what may happen in terms of drought or even flood. Okay. Because seasonally, we hear that the Bagri Dam is open and the entire crops are wiped away of by farmers who farm along the Bagri Dam.
Okay.
So I think it's very important that this is done very well.
Brilliant, very brilliant submissions. We keep hearing green financing coming up a few times. I'll come back to the panelists with a few questions, but I feel that the audience should be an integral part of this discussion. So before I come back to the panelists, maybe I should give a chance both to the online and in-person audience. We'll take 3 questions, one from this section, one from that section. I already see 2 from that session. So, sir, please, we'll take the 3 questions and then the panelists will respond, and then we can come back for a second round if there's time. Yes, please, the microphone. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Richard Abari. I work with the Ghana Hydrological Authority. When I saw the portfolio of Mr. Jimfi, I was a bit excited because I knew that something about the carbon markets will come up. I didn't hear anything on the carbon markets. Okay. The last time I checked, it seems it's crashing. Many of the big players who were wishing to, who usually buy carbon credits, seem not to be so much interested.
Okay.
My question is this: is the carbon market a viable option for financing flood risk?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll take this middle row. We'll take one from here, and okay, you go ahead, and then from then we come to the middle row. Thank you.
Okay, great. My name is Architect Stephen Anak.
Yes.
So my question is multi-phased.
Please,
so in Japan,
we want to give everybody the chance to ask.
I'll be very quick. So in Japan, they have the Development Bank of Japan that has a crisis response operations, right? And the purpose of this operations is basically to have a fund, emergency fund, so that whenever they have
that you have for the country in resolving floods. I'm looking at the financing, and I'm a real estate developer. My question is, did you look into the country how we can raise money? Why I'm asking that question is that it seems to be a major red tape in major areas where the country can raise money. For instance, as a developer, it's so much hectic to just get a building permit. So every time I send my staff to the town planning, I kind of look at how many people are willing to pay for building permit and they are unable. So it takes an average of 3 months to a year to obtain a building permit. That's a major money that the country is losing. If you take the same to Lands Commission, the same process. People line up to pay, but they are unable to even pay for the government to raise this revenue.
So the question.
So I see great ideas of how to raise. If your research look towards internal issues that we can do to solve this matter, that would be great.
Brilliant. Very good. So I'll distribute the question among our panelists. So the first one is the carbon fund viable? I don't know if Mr. Notte, you'd be able to handle that, or we should come back to Foster on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Foster, you can handle the first two, and then maybe how to raise other funds will come to Equia and Samson. Thank you. Foster, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. On the carbon market, maybe because I wanted to speak a little, that is why I didn't talk about it. We have done a lot of work and very much advanced on the carbon market under the Paris Agreement, Article 6.2, the voluntary market. Currently, Ghana is among the few countries we developed framework, we gotten the registry and all that required for us to access funding within the voluntary space. And we have engaged about 5 countries. One is much advanced. We have a program, about 5 projects on their way, and the project about $800 million, and is expected to bring in about $100 to $150 million. In terms of how it can feed into risk financing, what I want to assure is that out of the proceeds and other things that are coming in, a portion is being intentionally put together to support related adaptation which disaster risks fall under. There are a lot of things we can discuss under, but intentionally, because we have noted that issues of adaptation is difficult to make a business case. So in our own innovative way, we want to ensure that that is supported. Apart from that, we also looking at ways in which we can tap into the carbon to be able to support disaster risk financing.
Okay,
so that is what I want to say.
There was a question about emergency fund, whether we have regulation on that.
In terms of whether we have any law in relation to disaster risk, I think the law that sets up NADMO ensure that we can manage disaster when it happens. But based on the current amendment, now they move from just being responsive to proactive. Apart from that, the EPA law currently is being amended, and we should also know that EPA is the technical wing of all the discussion that we are having within the climate space. So all are being looked at. We have strategies and all that it takes to be to ensure that when disaster occur, it can be managed. In the other thing that you, I don't know, but let me just touch on it, then other colleagues can. Whether we have
Okay. So I think it was more about the emergency fund. The third one was about trying to raise money locally rather than looking at
okay. So yeah, so it's also very important. We've done a lot of work. If you asked me this question about 8 years ago, about 10 years ago, I would say we don't have that. But currently, right down from the central bank to the point of the commercial bank, they are all aware. And under the sustainable banking principle that is being led by the Bank of Ghana, and from our end is to ensure that the financial institution dedicate a portion of their portfolio into green. They are moving further. Currently, we looking at how we can come out with a taxonomy that will guide the sector. A lot is being done. We have a lot of engagement. Government in its own innovative way has engaged and tried to de-risk the financial sector by providing some green credit lines so that some of the banks can offload it to beneficiary. I don't want to mention it, but there are products out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So they haven't seen any hands, or I've seen one from my architect friend, I think. Please go ahead.
Architect Adudu Nuviadenu. I, as a professional, I must confess I'm getting confused actually. Is there, from the practical point of view, I want you to be specific that we went for this money and we have done this, it's here. Practically, so that both those of us who are in the the technical industry, the built industry, we can identify, as well as the lay, the citizens.
Okay.
If not, you have told that it's like you talk about plans, what we are doing, and then I also hear we've done this. So I don't know if you can really clarify it and be very practical so that we will know exactly and understand what you are saying.
I'll take two more and then we'll wrap up from the panelists.
Thank you very much. My name is Architect Michael Botedoku. I'm a practicing architect. And I'm very happy with the question Architect Tedodo asked, because I'm also a bit puzzled about the way this whole paradigm works out. In the field of practice, last year, for example, I had to help a community on the Oyarifa Road. They're called Ubuntu Estates. There are about 100 homes built, people live there, and the drainage system led nowhere. Anytime there's a major rainfall, 4 feet of flooding in the homes, So I called a hydro engineer friend of mine. He's been helping them, and they're going around literally house to house, getting residents to contribute to solve the problem, even to pay him for the design. So I'm not quite sure how it works out, whether the initiatives you're talking about, excuse me, are targeted at government and government agencies, or whether they are wide open and private estate companies who are developing. Sorry?
Thank you very much. We'll take our last question. Question well noted. We'll take our last question and then our panelists will respond.
Okay, thank you. My name is Yvonne Oseado, and my question is to Eke Asante. So from her submission, they are coming up, or their project is on innovative insurance solutions. It deviates from the normal insurance, which I understand and I appreciate. But then also in her submission, there was a lot of if government buys in. So my question is, as you are currently on the project, is there no government participation? Is government not involved, included, carried along? Are you going to end the project before you now have government buy-in? And then if they don't buy in, what happens? We all know how I don't want to say volatile, but how our governance system is in the country.
Okay.
So then what happens?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think the first two questions, we'll let the government respond to it last. Not that they are not important, but maybe they may have more to say to it. But Madam Ekuya, if you can respond, I'll just ask a question in addition, and then you could respond to both. So she wants to know, you kept saying that government is part. So what role is government playing in your project? But then, what kind of private or private-public partnerships can we leverage to finance flood risk management? So if you could tie the two together, that would be very good. Just
thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for the question. So from the beginning of the project was actually launched 2022, and this particular project is actually done together with the government of Ghana. And here, key stakeholders that we work with is the Ministry of Finance. We have the National Disaster Management Organization. We have GMET, we have GHA, and other relevant stakeholders that we work with. I kept saying government buys in, as in the product has been developed as a product concept. And as experts brought together, we came together to develop this product for the government because it's a sovereign product. And it being a sovereign product, it still triggers to the poor and vulnerable within the Gama region. And with our expertise in developing the product, even though we have insurance companies on board, which is Alliance and Treasury, is up to government to still open up for local participation for other insurance companies to also come on board to bid. Because this is government, there's a government product.
I think in Texas they have something like that. In Brazil, they have special reduction. Let me say like import tax waivers on certain items. I mean for flood victims and so forth. Okay. With this, if we have a fund like the Hydro Fund, which has just been launched, I think we can have something like that. I mean to fund it, a specific tax. I mean to fund it. We can also, like others are saying, how do we mobilize some funds internally? If you look at, recent times, we have a lot of private institutions, private firms, individuals, and so forth, supporting flood-related victims and so forth. We can mobilize and channel those funds, into development of into development areas. That will support, flood victims and some of the disaster areas. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So there were two very important questions. First one, architect Adodo wanted to know, where does the money go? I think she wants to ask the government's rep. And we had architect as well, Boku, sorry for mixing up the name. He wanted to understand whether the investments are only for government. So I'll tie it into my last question to Mr. Jemfi. What kind of incentives can the government implement to encourage private investment in flood risk reduction? So the first, to tell us where does the money go to, and whether the money is for only government-related projects or for others, and how does government incentivize or encourage private investment in flood risk reduction? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll tie in your question and make a comment on what Samson mentioned. I think it's also very important that I mentioned that we currently working on environmental fiscal reform that will look at the tax incentives and also the tax component that will support this cause. Then in it, we are also developing a mimic of the Green Climate Fund and the fund you are talking about, the Ghana Green Fund, in which I did indicate that the carbon market, the carbon financing, a portion will be lure into it to be able to support interventions such as this. Now, to come back to the question on where is the money, I did indicate that government looking at the sector being a little bit new, and also to want to create innovation and to de-risk the sector, the funding is not sitting with government as most of the time we think. So, for example, the Agence Française Développement gave us some, I think, 30 million euros, which I don't know whether if I mention, I may have myself. So some of the banks, and it's an advertisement for them, Car Bank, the Ghana Commercial Bank have this funding, and Car Bank, as far as I know, has been disbursing this fund for more than 2 years now. So this funding are within the private sector. The other one, which the KFW also gave about $20 million, is also went to some of the banks, EcoBank and all that. The other thing that is new that we currently discussing in terms of the whole package is going to Development Bank Ghana. That's also about, no, since it's not conclusive. It's almost 20 million, but the figure is not conclusive. And that is also within the private space. The other funding that I also want to talk about is the one that the Global Shield is giving. Part of it is serving as seed funding for the Agricultural Insurance Fund that government set up, and also we want to get the industry players to come on board and all that. And this is where the funding is. In terms of the Green Climate Fund, the affirmative finance action for women, that's also about 20 million, different component to support the women, targeting women, is also available. That's a collaboration between AFDB, and EcoBank. The Accelerated Solar Action Program, under it, the solar program is also with a collaboration between EcoBank and Energy Commission. There are a lot out there. So in terms of the funding, none is with government, because I always say this, that government is, the Ministry of Finance especially, is not an implementing entity. It's a policy entity, and it's an institution that is expected to mobilize funding. I'm sure my senior here will confirm that. So all the money is out there. So I think it's important we engage and also be able to tap into this funding that exists. I believe.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I think we've had a very brilliant discussion session. We've heard about green financing. We've heard about debt swap. We've also heard about insurance solutions. And I like points that were made by the groups here. We heard about self-help and the fact that we need to also consider how to raise tax. Maybe to conclude, maybe I might chip in a little bit before I leave. A question about taxes. We don't like taxes, but what if government said all of us tiling our homes, we should pay a bit more tax to improve flood management, because we are increasing stormwater runoff by preventing percolation in our home. I'll be guilty, perhaps. We'll have a few of us who will be 50% guilty, but we should consider a tax that deals with post-development runoff. The runoff in your area, if it's more after you develop, you pay a bit of tax to help us to manage it. A second thing about self-help is about harvesting rain in our homes. And government is going to spend so much money to do detention basins, and some of these lands are not even available. But in everybody's home, there is a small bit of space, and perhaps if we can each harvest a small volume of water, then if you multiply it by maybe if we take Accra, there are about 5 million inhabitants, and if we all could harvest very small, it means when you multiply it, little drops of water could help us to reduce how much government has to invest. So let's think of post-development runoff tax as also an option that, whilst Ministry of Finance is talking of the fiscal reforms, these are some of the things that you could say. So we've been good audience. We've had wonderful panelists. So I just want to say thank you to panelists, thank you to for everybody. Thank you.
We say thank you, Dr. Betha Date, Mr. Foster Jimfi, Mr. Sequia Champoma Sante, and Mr. Samson Note. How about a group photograph together? Panelists. And so that's how they bring closure to emerging and innovative financing models for flood risk reduction. All the things they said are good, but they left out the most important. To mitigate risk of flooding, ladies and gentlemen, is simple. Allow Cheddar to take the sea to Kumasi. It's as simple as that. Then we'll all be safe this flooding. It has been an interesting day one, and like the minister promised, this is not a talk shop, for which reason we've outlined some takeaways. At the end of today, I want you to go out there and tell the world that this is what transpired on day one. The key takeaways are as follows. The government plans to scale up a scheme to cover both the private and the public sector workers nationwide. Very important. Ensuring all qualified Ghanaians can access affordable housing. Number two, in the 2013 financial year, 18 million Ghana cedis was disbursed to pay rent advances to cover 1,247 individuals across the country. Revision of Ghana's rental laws is currently ongoing to responsive private funding needs. Number four, the government has initiated digitalization of rent control department operations to improve service delivery. The government has implemented the Greater Accra Resilience and Integrated Development Project. And the government has also invested up to 523 million Ghana cedis in national flood control programs between 2018 and 2023 to reduce the flood risk. These are the key takeaways for today. And tomorrow, when we come back, we shall delve into the hard matters, what we call the meat and potatoes. Starting tomorrow off will be our Chief Internal Auditor, who set the tone with a prayer, and then everything will proceed. We shall have 3 amazing conversations, one on housing deficit in Ghana, unlocking strategies to adequate access to housing. That will be moderated by Professor Daniel Yao Adai Duya of the KNUST. Then we shall go into what is of interest to most people, contextualizing mortgage financing for affordable housing. Nana Otu Texan will lead us in that. But for me, what you all should not miss tomorrow, for which reason I encourage you to be here early, are the 2 presentations addressing Ghana's housing challenges, the role of the state, where you hear from the Ministry of Works and Housing, Architect Chris Pobi. He has some fascinating ideas for you to ponder over. And then my own brother and friend will spell out the housing sector incentive packages, the case for Ghana. Jesse Ejepong, a consultant to this project, will be here to answer all these and more. Ladies and gentlemen, give yourselves a round of applause. You've been amazing for day 1. Tomorrow we'll reconvene here at exactly 8 o'clock. There'll be some small breakfast in the foyer to keep you filled. So we begin at exactly 9 o'clock. Let's spread the news out there and let's come in our numbers. On behalf of the ministry, the minister, his deputy, who is the chair, and the chief director, would like to say thank you all for coming. Goodbye and Godspeed.
Accra and many parts of Ghana face many challenges each year, including inadequate housing and flooding. Many lack access to affordable, safe, and